Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and the Brexit wing of the Conservative right claim they will succeed where the centre-right failed and arrest plunging birth rates and minimise immigration. Yet Farage, the face of Brexit, promised the electorate that Britain's departure from the European Union in 2016 would enable the country to take back control of its borders and bring immigration down to a trickle. Instead, immigration exploded to previously unimaginable highs. Total arrivals in 2016 was 622,000, rising to 825,000 in 2018, and then 1.3 million, more than 1% of the whole population, in both 2022 and 23, with a further 945,000 in 2024. Surely then, just as with the Tories and Labour, Farage and Reform cannot be trusted to keep any promises on the issue. That logic should be extended to all of the right and all parties that support private property, because they are responsible for falling birth rates and accelerating immigration, because both trends serve the inherent needs of capitalism, of capital accumulation. As the English historian Adam Tooze points out, Hitler's precious Aryan Germany was in fact more cosmopolitan than Germany is today. While Farage is not Hitler, the point is that right-wing figures are always trying to con you, and the further to the right you go, the more true that becomes. This truth, veiled in the right's two-faced anti-immigrant rhetoric, is evident from the fact that during the early post-war period, from about 1945 to 75, when up to 37% of Britain's productive assets were state-owned, birth rates were high and immigration rates low. Since then, capital's profitability has become increasingly dependent, because of its very nature, on declining investment in domestic human labour relative to automation, the primary reason for falling birth rates, and to make up for the ensuing skills and labour shortages, importing cheaper labour from overseas. In the 1960s and 70s, total arrivals remained steady at around 200,000 a year, around 0.3% of the population, and actually declined to 150,000 by the end of the 70s, while net migration was slightly negative throughout that period. This was a problem for capital and the dominant part of the economy that remained privately owned, since a declining population lends itself to falling labour productivity and slowing rates of profit and capital accumulation. The Labour Party had already started to turn fully against the pro-nationalisation workers' movement, but then Margaret Thatcher and the Tories were elected in 1979, and the reprivatisation drive began in earnest. In 1985, immigration jumped to 230,000, then 250,000 in 1989, and 329,000 in 1991, staying above 300,000 in the last years of the government of John Major, Thatcher's successor. Tony Blair's New Labour, elected in 1997, was slightly less right-wing on some social issues during a period in which profit rates had recovered, which allowed more room for public spending, but Labour continued to privatise the economy. Immigration rose to 454,000 in 1999 and continued to rise to 604,000 in 2010. The return of the Tories in 2010 did not arrest the trend. Privatisation of public assets and funds continued apace, and the immigration figure hit 667,000 in 2014. Similarly, the average 5-year change in the UK's foreign-born population rose from nearly 0% of the population in 1980 to 2.5% by 2010. The post-war birth rate in Britain peaked at 2.93 in 1964, just as capitalism started sinking into its first major post-war crisis, and today stands at 1.57, well below the generational replacement rate of 2.1, meaning we are not producing a large enough workforce to maintain economic growth or the tax base needed for public services and pensions. Immigration is actually still nowhere near high enough to plug the skills and labour shortages. Surging immigration is bound to be met in any country with general concerns that public services cannot keep up with demand, something that cynical demagogues and politicians are in turn bound to exploit in order to play divide and rule and obscure deeper structural issues that lie at the heart of falling living standards and chaotic demographic shifts. Essentially, however, the people most vocally concerned about immigration, right-wing privatizers, have been the ones voting for it the most over the past 50 years. The truth of the matter is that declining living standards, falling birth rates, and surging immigration, which includes displacement, ethnic cleansing, and brain drains that rob poorer and colonized nations of valuable human resources, are all symptomatic of the decaying nature of capitalism, a self-exhausting Ponzi scheme that is bleeding dry the vast majority of people in the UK and the world in general through the privatization of public assets and wealth. Only communist parties have the answers to this mounting catastrophe.